Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. Um, I want to make sure I'm respectful of everyone's time and have plenty of time at the end for questions and give you all as much back of your crazy days as humanly possible. Um, Thanks for joining today's connector call. Again, this is Phelan O'Neill at Young Invincibles. I'm the Deputy Director of Product and Innovation. Amongst other things I do at YI, I help run our Get Covered connector tool that you all use and handle everything from support to directing new features and development and bug fixes to leading our training and working with subscribers to make sure that everything suits the needs of assisters in this rapidly changing environment. We're here today to talk about virtual remote appointments and specifically a new feature we're rolling out later this week on the connector that better helps adapt to this new world of predominantly phone or virtual or remote or whatever you want to call them appointments that are not being done face to face. I know there was a great presentation today that I hope some of you got a chance to attend by our friends at CPPP in Texas that talked about sort of their best practices for remote appointments from sort of a technical assistance point of view. I'll see if we can get a recording of that and share that around. Otherwise, but this call is going to focus predominantly on the connector since that's what we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about sort of how we've changed the connector. We'll do a demonstration. We'll run through a series of sort of standard questions that people may have. And then at the very end, we will open it up for questions from you all. So some background on virtual appointments and sort of how we ended up here. With increasingly shrinking budgets due to cuts to the Navigator grant and just sort of a general transition in the enrollment landscape, in the healthcare landscape more generally, many assisters, even before this recent situation with COVID-19, have been moving to using phone and virtual appointments in the past 2 years to expand their reach or really just to maintain their reach, to be able to continue to serve areas that are not as densely populated, that are harder to reach, or even just to cover a wider swath of the state or of the region without having to rely on someone being physically on the ground here. Additionally, many states are in quarantine or stay-at-home orders due to the COVID-19 outbreak. And so in a lot of cases with consumers getting laid off, consumers realizing that their healthcare situations have changed dramatically due to changes of income and employment, this is really the only way that many consumers can get help. The option for face-to-face enrollment now and for the considerable future, for at least several weeks to months, face-to-face enrollment is not going to be an option. And even without sort of a special SCP for everyone, there are still millions of people that are losing their jobs and who are going to need help navigating the healthcare landscape and finding a plan that works for them. So the central question that we were asking ourselves and that we've been discussing for a couple of weeks as a team have been, how do we adapt the connector to these new realities? And how do we sort of get something live and available and ready for people to use right now in spite of all these new and rapidly changing situations? So how does the connector play into this? Well, those of you who have either read our support materials on the homepage, who have asked about this directly, or who've innovated yourself and come up with this, have probably done something like this. They set up a location in the connector, same as always, and call it something like virtual or phone appointments. They include some description of how it's going to work, as well as a phone number for their office, and you can schedule it same as you would a regular appointment. My sisters over the years have reported a number of issues with this and a number of frustrations that I think really stood out. The first is that you can't manage schedules across multiple locations. So because the connector is designed to be for brick and mortar enrollment, right? Face-to-face, one-on-one, in-person assistance. When we built this system, we never imagined a world where someone would be wanting to be available simultaneously, all across the state or all across their region. The idea that someone might want to offer assistance to someone in Tampa or Orlando or Tallahassee or Miami, all at the same time, was never something that we had thought of at the original conception of the connector. Assisters reported that sort of keeping that availability and making sure that they aren't sort of limiting themselves or trying to juggle too much was really hard without in this current system. They had to generally restrict it to sort of their core region, or maybe pick a couple of hotspots and just hope it worked out. We also heard that even for people who weren't focused on scheduling, but especially those who were, that making locations and their services available everywhere is really hard without significant upfront work. Trying to figure out, how do I have enough locations in the connector to make sure that I reach everyone in our service area, in our state, in our region, takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, in a lot of ways that people found very frustrating. So we wanted to fix that. The new way is kind of like the old way, but we're calling this sort of our phase one of solutions. As I'll talk about later on, our hope is to continue to invest and expand in this new direction for enrollment. But the basic premise is that, as opposed to revamping the entire thing, you all can set up locations that we will enter as sort of a default for a range of zip codes, no matter how far away it is. I sort of think of this as a set it and forget it. This will be managed initially by YI and our team here on the connector support. There won't be any conflicts or issues, and if you want to update things, support will look like any normal support ticket. You'll email connector support. We'll work with you to find a solution. So you can see here a little preview of what it's going to look like on the admin side, on YI side, and we'll show you what this looks like in reality in just a second. But essentially, you give us a list of zip codes that a location is going to serve, or that a hotline serves, even if it's statewide or region-wide or county-wide or whatever. If you give us those zip codes and say, we want this location to be available for everyone in these areas, the new system is going to allow everyone to do that. So what is that going to look like? That's a great question. So we're going to start here. This is what a standard user of the connector would see when they're editing a location. This is one we've popped in already, thanks to our great partners in Wisconsin, who've put it together. Right, so we just have it same as always. The organization name is a location, information about who they are, that they're covering everywhere in the state of Wisconsin, and then the phone number to call for help or to schedule an appointment. Right, everything looks the same here for any basic assister. So I want to emphasize that. That's something we'll talk about again in a second. But for everyone on this call, while the widget will change a bit in terms of how it displays results, and while we'll be doing work on the back end to accommodate you all, nothing will change for you all. There's no needed training or explanation or adaptation of permissions or anyone getting confused. Everything is going to be fundamentally the same for assisters. Now, this is what it looks like from our standpoint here at Young Invincibles. We have the same location, but we also have this new box here, default location for. So you can see here, this covers a wide swath of places across the state of Wisconsin that they want to have this be available for. We have the ability to add or remove them. So I could do my home zip code. It's going to take a second to search. Here, I'm going to use a different on here to show this off. There's still a couple things we're working out here. Right, so I was making a new location. I could add 20036. Okay, apparently there's a bug with that, which is why we are still testing and getting things ready, but you'll be able to set these locations here, and you could add or remove them depending on your changes in service area. So again, there's some things we need to work on, but from our perspective, this is what will look like, and we'll be able to change this either manually if you want to change like a couple of these, or we'll be able to upload this regardless from a spreadsheet into the database directly. So what does this look like in the actual lived connector world? So I'm going to show you two different examples here. One is on the live connector and one is on our sort of testing, staging, development environment. So we're going to use the zip code 54511, which is right here, right, for covering Wisconsin. On our development site, right, we've updated that we want this to be a default result. It's not live yet. So if we search now on the live connector, we get no results. There's no in-person assistance available within a 25-mile radius of this zip code in Wisconsin. That's a problem for people who are in increasingly hard to reach areas, rural communities, etc., where service may not be available. So how do we go about fixing this, and what does this look like? This is the same tool, obviously, but from our development site. This will pop up, and that same location is now the top listed result here. The top listed result here. If it had a schedule attached to it, so if we went back here and I made a new schedule, Wisconsin schedule. Wednesday, starting today, and today, PM, 5 o'clock PM. Right, so we now have a session up here for this location. If we ran this search again, it can take a second, but go back and see if it's the other one, maybe. Covering Wisconsin. Okay, it hasn't updated yet, but you will see that it would look normally like if we did, we'll just use this one here, because I'm familiar with it. Right, for default locations that have a schedule attached, it would pop up here at the top of the result for schedule an appointment online. If there's no schedule attached, it will show up down here at the top of the please call to schedule an appointment. You'll notice here that this is way outside of the search radius. It looks like this is about 90 miles away, but it's still going to appear at the top even though it's outside the search radius, because that's how we've set it up to capture that. It looks like we have a question here. Someone says, we have 16 offices covering the entire state. Each office covers dozens of zip code. Could the spreadsheet option work in this scenario? Yes. So for initial uploads, something that would be the best way to handle it, is to send us either the location or whatever you want as sort of the hotline information and a spreadsheet. And I will show you here, since that's a great question, one example here. There are a couple ways it could look like. This is the preferred way, where you have the zip code and the ID of the location. A less useful way that still works would be something like this, where ideally it's color-coded or separated by each individual office or location. But we'd prefer that you go ahead and create that location yourself, and then just feed us whatever the ID for that location is. And we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, so basically the idea here is that rather than redesign the whole connector, we are going to feed you all, take your information and sort of have it as a default for the service areas that you cover. Glad that answered your question. Cool. So that's a bit of an overview. Again, we're still working out a couple of hijinks and bugs here. We wanted to just give you all a bit of a sneak preview as we sort of iron these kinks out before going live. so that that's available for you all and you understand conceptually what we're talking about. Now, there are a couple of questions that have popped up or that I've thought of. The first, obviously, is what does this mean for assisters? And the key takeaway here is that fundamentally, nothing changes for assisters. The admin side will look the same. Again, we here at YI will set these default locations based on information that subscribers provide to us. So for those of you all who do not work for, who are not sort of your admins for the connector, the people who provide you access, who run your regular statewide coalitions or sort of the prime recipient of the Navigator grant, you can work with those people, but we'll get that information from them directly. And we'll be happy to work and upload that for them and have that set up. We know some people have built their own makeshift solutions and created sort of a hodgepodge network of locations. If that's something that you're concerned about taking down or need help with, feel free to reach out to us at connectorsupport@younginvincibles.org. As always, we're available to help and come up with solutions to problems, including helping you fix things that you set up before we develop this feature. The next question, this is one that we just answered, but I'll go over it again. We use more than one virtual location or hotline number across our region. And the simple takeaway is if you can compile it, we can upload it. The whole idea here is that we match zip codes to those locations so that it both matches how the widget works and it can be increasingly flexible, right? So that way you can have sort of a patchwork across your state or region that works and reflects the realities on the ground without us having to impose, you must call one number or have one location for the entire state. If you want to do it that way, that's great. We're happy to do that. But we also realize, as someone said, in some cases, there are very dispersed coalitions that all have their own preference. Again, subscriber contacts should send a spreadsheet matching zip codes to locations as they compile this information directly to us, and we will work on getting that uploaded. Another question that's come up is some combination of like, we don't have a hotline, or we're not doing virtual enrollment, or we're skeptical of this, or we're just simply not interested in using this feature at this time. That's okay. In places where we don't have subscribers, or where subscribers choose not to provide this type of information, we're going to direct them to healthcare.gov's 1-800 number and to their 24/7 hotline. The reason for this is sort of twofold. We explored a couple of different options here, but one, sort of regardless of what we all may think of different resources and organizations at a national level, fundamentally everyone has to go through CMS and healthcare.gov at some point, even if it's sort of on the back end from, say, a agent or broker that works with healthcare.gov. And fundamentally, we wanted to maintain our status as honest brokers. We know that people have different opinions of skepticism and engagement with different groups like Health Sherpa or other related services. And while we are not here to say that they're not useful, in fact, we find those places great, we thought it was fair to sort of maintain our status as an honest broker, to sort of just use the standard healthcare.gov line for the start. Again, we will evaluate this as we continue to go. If people have some compelling reason they can come up with, right, we shouldn't be directing people to healthcare.gov, that is fine, and we can deal with that. But sort of our status quo is going to be that that's the way to send people. Another thing that's going to come up, I'm sure, as people get familiar with this, you may have style or design feedback questions. If we go back here and look at this result here, right, I think ideally, we could do any number of things. We could feature this more prominently. We could get rid of the mile radius. We should get rid of the address so it doesn't show up, even though you still have to technically enter it. You may have other ideas that we haven't thought of, but we recognize that in this new reality of coronavirus and COVID-19, that things are changing really quickly on the ground. And so our goal, as always, has been substance over style. We wanted to have something that could get this information out to people as quickly as possible for you all to use and adapt your systems to, and adapt your enrollment practices to for those of you still doing the work in the field. But we do hear you, and we do know that there is ways that we can improve this. Our goal is to improve sort of the design sometime before open enrollment. That's obviously contingent on sort of our financial situation and the budget of the connector, which still looks very strong, but obviously we have to make decisions about what and where we spend our money and what and where we do that too, including providing discounts to our subscribers, maintaining the tool, etc. And so while this is one of our top priorities, I don't want to make any promises that it will look fundamentally different. However, as has always been the case for the, I guess now over 3 years that I've been in charge of the connector, we take feedback from you all very seriously here at YI. People who have been around for a while can tell you that some of the biggest changes we've made over the past several years have been the things that assisters have been the loudest about and have been the most prominent and coherent about explaining how this can meaningfully improve their enrollment work. So as always, send your feedback to me at phelan.o'neill@younginvincibles.org. Be it about this new feature, be it about other things you'd like to see in the connector. Again, I cannot promise anything, but the feedback we get from assisters helps us much more concretely raise money for future improvements. If we can say that assisters across the country have explained a critical need for this versus just ideas that we come up with at YI. And fundamentally, of course, the connector is meant to be a tool that helps assisters, not just something cool that YI owns. And so if it works, if something doesn't work for you all, it doesn't work for us. This is something that will come up, I'm sure, a little later. We would like to update our listings. We have a new partner we're bringing on into our network. We've added a new hotline. We've changed our hotline. We've changed service areas. Connector support at younginvincibles.org will always be the best place for these types of things in the future. For smaller changes, we'll sort of take this like the self-checkout or express lane at a grocery store, like 10 items or less is sort of a rule of thumb, I think, to start here. You can just let us know. Or for instance, if you're a statewide subscriber and you just want us to put like 211 or your hotline or a specific location as the default for the entire state, that seems fine. And you can just let us know that and we can adapt that as, you know, we can compile that on our own. However, if you would like to make major updates, if you have a situation like the commenter earlier did, where you know, you have several different partners with several different, you know, priorities across different regions of the state, a spreadsheet is better. It's going to be more accurate. It's going to be faster, and we can get it in quicker. But just make clear, both in the body of your email and the subject, as always, what it is you're looking for so we can prioritize these things effectively. Another question is, we already have a location set up. So as we saw before, going back to right, this group in Tampa, Florida, already has a virtual appointment location set up. Maybe that's what they want to prioritize, maybe it isn't, but if they did, all they would need to do here is to give us the location ID and the zip codes it covers, and we can make that work for them. The other question that comes up related to this that some of you may have heard me talk about before, we've talked about this in a couple of support emails. We've talked about this in the context of what I've called RSVP links on the widget. So the ability to direct people to book an appointment at a specific location on the widget as opposed to just generically. There's a unique ID for every item in the connector that in the case of locations follows the slash locations part in the URL. So this location, Keio Health Connection in Arizona, has the ID of that's a typo in this, but 11635. Um, as I showed earlier with this spreadsheet, the ideal format is to have the zip codes and then that ID number side by side. We're happy to help sort of walk through that with you all or help you compile it. But the closer to this you can get to us, the quicker we can get this uploaded and the quicker we can accommodate your request. Again, so that brings us to our next steps. I think we're hoping to get this live by the end of week. It looks like there are still a couple of things here that we may need to add, update or change, or sort of tinker with. But things look pretty solid. It looks like the data we've uploaded to our testing environment looks correct. So we should be able to get this live either by the end of week or over the weekend. Our time frame right now is that anyone who can get us these listings by the end of the day on Friday, which would be Friday, April 3rd, we will work to upload them by the close of business on Tuesday of next week, which is April 7th. People who miss that deadline or need changes or whatever, we will do in batches. There won't be a strict time frame for that. It will sort of depend on our availability and how many we get. We want to sort of minimize the number of times that we're uploading and downloading stuff to the database. But again, we also know that this is important, and so we will work to make sure that we have accommodated everyone's needs here. The full connector listserv, it looks like some of you have joined that are more day-to-day users, in addition to a couple of admins here. Everyone who is sort of on our connector updates list will be sent an update with this information and potentially another office hour session sometime next week, once we have sort of the first batch of things uploaded and ready to go. We will also share out a recording of this webinar and slides to the same list who got this initial email, plus everyone who registered sometime tomorrow. We will also upload a recording of today's webinar to our YouTube channel by next Monday, April 6th is our goal. So for those of you who aren't familiar, there's not a ton on it. We're going to improve this over the summer here. But if you click this, want to see how this all works, view the latest Get Covered connector videos in the webinar archive. It takes you directly to YouTube, where we have a couple of trainings that we've done. And again, this is where we will be hosting this video as well as a tutorial on sort of explaining this once it's ready, sort of the like 2 to 3 minute version for people to watch and understand in the coming weeks. So that's the biggest things, I think, for us. Again, we appreciate your all patience. We appreciate you all reaching out and telling us that this is something you really need and really value. That allows us to talk with our funders and talk internally and prioritize things like this. And we're really excited about this and continuing to support sort of the next generation of enrollment work here via the connector. I will open it up for other questions. To start, you can type them in the chat box if you have them. If your question gets a little complicated or you have sort of issues articulating it, I'm happy to unmute you and you can ask your question that way. But to start, if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. Someone asked, do we send the spreadsheet to you or to support? Either way is fine. whatever is easiest. I'll put both of our email addresses up here. If you send it to me, actually, we'll say you can send it to me. I'll put my email and text in the chat as well. Younginvincibles.org. Again, we're going to handle this at the subscriber level. Yeah, so Nick just replied again, if you are, if you did not, and if you got this email forwarded to you by someone else, and that's how you found out about this recording, you should contact that person with your information. We are trying to handle this on a subscriber or statewide level. That makes it easier for us. It ensures that we have the fully accurate information and that there's no sort of internal conflicts. I know that in the past, Enroll America, when they hosted this, did a somewhat similar version of this. And our goal is to try and minimize the amount of conflict and issues that come up, both by keeping this a little simpler and by sort of handling this at a statewide level. So again, Diana, it looks like Nick is your contact. If you have questions or concerns, you can go to him, and then Nick knows how to get a hold of me if for some reason Nick has further questions. But thank you for that. That was a good question. Anyone else have a question here? Allison says we've had locations where we uncheck the active box, but they still appear in searches. Allison, if you can send that to me with the specific locations, I am happy to take a look at that this afternoon or this evening when I get a second. Great. Yep, fantastic. I guess we still have time here. I'll open it up to broader questions. I think we have this blocked off until 1 Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. So connector questions, think you would like me to look at, anything you want. This is the time for you to ask questions. Otherwise, this is sort of the end of our core presentation here. I'm going to, I think, stop recording this and let you all go. But before I do, I just want to say thank you all for your hard work. Thank you all for continuing to serve your communities in this difficult times. We here at Y, I hope you all are healthy and safe, and that you and your families are healthy and safe as well. So I'm going to stop this recording here. If you have other questions about the connector, I'll stay on for a while. Otherwise, thank you all for hopping on. Feel free to reach out with any other questions.